Debate is important. It has followed the human trail from the great philosophers of old to the political leaders of today. The French philosopher Michel Foucault wrote about how discourse and power are tied together. But when we look at some of the most important debates in our society, we can't help but notice an absence of substance behind the words that are exchanged. Often, these debates fall flat from their destiny as powerful instruments of leadership, and instead become simple agenda-pushing tools. For evidence of the decline of debate, we need only to look at a session of parliament in most places that have one. From screaming matches, to calling names, to self-righteous opposition to debate, to absolutely useless debate, these chambers across the world have turned debate into publicity stunts for politicians. To say that debate is flawed would be blaming the victim for the crime. Debate isn't flawed, but our ways of handling debate are. We have to say it as it is. Most people are bad at debating. It's easily observable by anyone who has argued with an opinionated relative or friend. It seems impossible to sway their views. We have gotten into the habit of dismissing facts that we feel attack our core beliefs, and instead, we seek out information that confirms whatever we already believe in. For example, if a debate on the idea that vaccines cause autism in children was to take place, the pro-vaxxers may provide any number of scientific sources refuting this, but the anti-vaxxers will probably refuse to even read them. And vice versa, the anti-vaxxers will provide the pro-vaxxers with article after article trying to link autism to vaccinations. Article that they will not pay any attention to and dismiss as pseudoscience. Even when our position is right, how can we expect people to read our sources and change their opinions when they see that we won't even try to understand why they hold their beliefs? When people argue their own points to us, the majority of us rarely view it as a two-way interaction. Instead, we tend to see their explanations more as a lecture about the superiority of their opinions, making us feel like we have to take a defensive stance. Because of this, our debates are simultaneously becoming feeble, insensitive, and out of touch. But this has also led us to live in a time where it's become easier than ever to fall into extreme views, thus making it even harder to debate civilly. According to professors Robert Talisse and Scott Aiken, leading philosophers and political theorists, this weakness of our discourse is undermining our democracy as we come to see one another exclusively as either allies or rivals. But they also warn that our society encourages hyper-politicized social media content, echo chambers, and distorted pictures of our political rivals, which all have led to the breakdown of debate. While disagreement is the foundation of our societies, these concepts are causing us to separate from those with different views and consider their opinions not even worth listening to. But there are ways to improve our arguments and return to a debate that will help society function instead of dividing it. Here are 3 ways we can start with. First, we have to find a way to connect with the person we're debating with, by understanding what leads their moral compass. We often don't realize that the people we're debating with can be better persuaded by arguments that wouldn't convince us at all. While some might be better swayed by statistics, others will only budge with logical reasoning. Some others will require moral arguments, and some will need to see precedent. There's this false notion that by simply having contact with the opposing side, people of differing ideologies will be able to reduce their political polarization and thus allow them to better understand and listen to the other side's arguments. An experiment was run in 2017 by researchers at Duke, NYU, and Princeton, where groups of Democrats and Republicans were paid to read more opinions of the other side on Twitter. The authors concluded that there was no evidence that intergroup contact on social media reduces political polarization. With this information, we can understand the current situation when it comes to debates. We tend to give more value to arguments that we personally see as convincing. Because we believe these arguments are great, we then think that the other side will also see them as convincing. However, that is not the case. Instead of simply exposing these people to different arguments, when we want to make someone listen and understand the other side's points, we have to look at the elements that can influence their opinion. For example, according to psychologists from UCLA and the University of Illinois, emotional arguments are more effective in convincing vaccine skeptics. They would be better convinced by reminding them how terrible a disease is and how vaccines can protect their children, whereas they would be less convinced by showing them scientific data and being confrontational. In a 2015 research article, Professor Matthew Feinberg and Rob Willer confirm that reframing arguments around the moral values of the opposition is typically the most effective way of transmitting them. In the 6 studies that they've conducted involving different political issues, they found that liberals were more accepting of conservative policies reframed around their values, and vice versa. Knowing all this, we can connect with the people we're debating with by breaking down this wall of ignorance between us. Because we would be accepting of our opponent's moral playing field, they wouldn't find our propositions morally repugnant to the point of avoiding discussion. Once we have established a conversation on a polite footing, we can now move on to the next step. The second step is simply listening to what the other has to say. It might seem obvious, but too often our reflex is to ignore what we don't want to hear. And as much as we might think we're doing it unnoticeably, for our opponents, it is quite obvious. Our problem here is that the person we're arguing with wants to feel like they've had their opinions heard. If not, they will reciprocate by not listening to ours and by being aggressive towards our views. Even worse still is the effect of certain words meant to shut down conversation. Often used on the internet, but also very present in face-to-face conversations, words such as cuck, incel, and Nazi have a real meaning, but are instead used as insults for people of differing opinions. These words increase prejudice and roots people more deeply in political polarization, making them less likely to engage in productive debate. A 2016 article by the journal Science shows what we have to do instead. The article shows that with a 10-minute conversation, it is possible to sway entrenched opinions on controversial issues. Their trick is not playing mind games or delivering untouchable arguments. Simply, we ask an open-ended question, listening attentively to what the other has to say, and then we ask another question based on what was told. The goal is to allow both sides to understand each other's perspective and to arrive to their own conclusions. As Professor Fleischer eloquently puts it, understanding won't happen when someone bitch slaps you with a statistic. Thirdly, to really nail an argument, civility is key. This is more than just being polite. This is having the ability to assess arguments and the reasons for an argument, no matter if we agree with it or if it's correct. All arguments must be given the same amount of respect for debates to achieve their full potential. An argument cannot be ignored simply because it's for the wrong viewpoint or it's too radically different. Civility also includes allowing spaces to host debates, places where people who want to argue can do so. The more spaces, the more fruitful debates, and the more fruitful debates, the more our fractious political environment can heal. Classrooms, campuses, coffee shops, online forums, even waiting in a line, normalizing debate in these places is important. Moreover, civility is encouraging debate and informing others on how to do it right. For civil debate is so important to the way our society runs that we can't allow it to be fizzled out by extremism, polarization, and agendas. When we disagree with something being said, we shouldn't recluse ourselves in dread. We should reach out and ask, why do you think that? By getting this understanding of why people hold their opinions, we're able to gain perspective and improve our own point of view. We give ourselves a chance to understand the reasoning of the other person, which will allow us to continue on in an informed and civil debate. All in all, debate is only effective when we are open and respectful towards all points of views, no matter how absurd they sound to us at the start. Our goal shouldn't be to zealously convert our opponents, but to understand their perspective and to convey ours. We can achieve this by relating our arguments to people's morals, asking open-ended questions, listening attentively to them, and being civil. If there's only one thing you can take away from all of this, remember, an apple a day keeps the doctor away, but a debate a day keeps the extremists at bay. Thank you.